2. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining this learning experience brought to you by CloudBees. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. We've got an exciting pulse meter report ahead, but before we dive into some numbers, I have just a couple of notes to review with everyone. First of all, we are recording our session today. So if you happen to miss any of our conversation, if you'd like to watch again, or if you'd like to share these insights with the rest of your team, we'll be sure to send you an email with a link to access the recording on demand. Now, if you'd like to get involved, there are a couple of ways to join our conversation. Your first option is to use the chat tab on the right side of your screen. So when you find that chat tab, I'd like you to let us know from where in the world you're joining from today. Now, if you have specific questions, we want you to direct those to the Q&A tab. Sending those questions to the Q&A just helps us keep track of which ones we've addressed, and we'd like to answer as many of your questions as we can live today, so be sure to send those in. If you jump over to the handout section, you'll find not only a copy of these presentation slides, but a full copy of the pulse meter report where we pulled a lot of this information. So feel free to download both of those while you're here. And we will be selecting 2 of our most engaged attendees to win a $50 Amazon gift card. Ways to become eligible are to send in your chats and questions and to also fill out our post-webinar survey. More on that at the top of the hour. So our topic today is the evolution of DevOps, a spotlight on platform engineering. I'm joined today by Hope Lynch, Senior Director of Platform at CloudBees. And we also have our very own Mitch Ashley, CTO at Techstrong Group and Principal of Techstrong Research, who conducted the research for today's pulse meter. So Hope and Mitch, thank you both so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. Mitch, do you want to open us up and give us some context?
You bet. Absolutely. We're going to share some data from the research that we did, collaborating with CloudBees. One of the things I'd love to do, Hope, is just have you say a little bit more of your background, because you have very extensive software engineering, DevOps, all that kind of things in your war chest of experience.
Yes, absolutely. And I've also managed platform engineering teams. So this topic is one that I have great interest in. As we talked about once, I've also pulled cable. I've punched down cable, worked on, in server rooms when the server room was really a thing, worked on engineering teams, but also on the other side. I've done the product management side, the strategy side for technology. The common theme for me is I've always worked in tech.
Fantastic. I think it all starts with everybody needs to pull some cables at some point.
Yeah, it's a good experience. Right.
Lots of good stuff. Well, awesome. It's always a pleasure to do roundtables and events like these with you and with the CloudBees team. Before we get into I can wonk out and get into all the data. We could talk about all the intricacies of that. Let's start out first with sharing our perspectives about what is platform engineering, because there's there's multiple definitions or aspects of it. And if you don't mind, I'll kind of start out sharing. One of my observations about platform engineering is the timing of it kind of came out when we were asking our developers around productivity. How do we get more productivity from the developers that we have with the economic downturn of about a year and a half, 2 years ago? And platform engineering was really catching fire at that point. And one of the aspects of that was developer productivity, portals, developer environments, as well as testing and production environments as well. So a lot of it was kind of, we've forgotten the developers. Let's go back and make sure that in the DevOps process, let's go back and make sure we're catering the things that are going to help them be the most productive. That's just one area. What's your perspective on maybe some other things about platform engineering?
I think one of the wonderful things about platform engineering is the concept of treating developers as customers, making sure that you understand their needs, what will make their jobs easier, the whole connection with the developer experience, right? Are they happy? Can they get the tools they need to do what they should but also are there some guide rails there so that there's a little bit of control from the organization, but hopefully it feels more like choice.
And part of that experience is taking some of the drudgery or toll out of your job or job of others. And so a lot of that is setting up environments, right? And I wish I could say every project I worked on had one environment for development, test, and production, but you run up different versions of things in production and test, and for this customer and that cloud and this
Mm-hmm.
version of software. So you end up with this complex matrix. And of course, like the wiring closet in every office building, as soon as you shut the door, as soon as you you set up that environment, it's suddenly chaos. I don't know how
Yeah,
it happens
spaghetti.
by itself, but it does.
Yeah, but a beautiful wiring closet is a beautiful thing.
It is. At
But
least
uh,
it starts out
but
that
but
way.
yes, but bringing some order to chaos is I think the overriding feature of platform engineering, because it is that deep look at what is needed to make things run well and to help developers get their work done. And with that, lots of conversations, lots of work, but done right, it advances everything that developers are doing.
Mhm. Absolutely. Good stuff. Well, let's jump into some of the research. In late 2023, we worked on some research in something we call a pulse meter. And a pulse meter is not a 50 question survey. It's sort of a snapshot, a more condensed look at a topic. And I'm going to share and we are going to use slides. I'm not a slide person unless we're showing data. Then I'm okay to use slides. So just a little bit on the methodology. We had 211 people that had responded, and we're collecting this data from Techstrong's online audiences on DevOps.com and CloudNative.com and our other websites. And the kind of people we were targeting, if you were, or looking for feedback on, are people that were either doing platform engineering or kind of adjunct to or customers of, if you want to think of it that way, ranging from software developers, DevOps people, cloud engineering, SREs, operations, et cetera. So there's kind of a big circle of people that, depending on your organization, are interacting with or consuming work output from this. Now, our data was a global in terms of our audience. And kind of the largest share come from North America, US, Canada, Mexico, and EMEA is the second largest, and we had a lot of responses there, as well as some from Asia Pac and countries in that part of the globe, if you will. So we have a pretty good representation across that set. So that to set the stage, and we take that data and we put it together, do some analysis on it. We write some thoughts and commentary. That all goes into this document called a pulse meter. If you're interested in getting a hold of that, it's up in the handout section. There'll also be more information a little bit later about how to get that or maybe share it with others, etc. But that's free to everybody to utilize. Okay, so one of the first questions we always like to know is kind of where are you in the life cycle or the journey of adopting something, right? Whether it's DevOps or whatever practice it might be. Where is your organization in adopting platform engineering? And oops, something happened to this slide. This is not quite right. It's not the right slide. Here we go.
I think that was the right slide.
Is it the right slide? Okay.
Yeah, the first one you
showed.
where?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it in adopting platform engineering? And some of the data that we had behind this was also, we had about 33% that they said that they were in progress. Another 20% said that they had fully implemented, which kind of seems a little high to me, given how it's not new, but it's not, that well established. And also only 17% said that they were in the planning stage for platform engineering. And so essentially everybody else was somewhere in that cycle of either adopting it, planning it, starting, you just started, or you're fully implemented. So it wasn't a small fraction, it was a large portion of the respondents that actually shared that. So
what speaks to me about that data point, though, is the rapid acceptance and adoption of the concept. To have that many respondents saying, I'm either implemented in progress planning, and so few saying, we have no plans whatsoever to take part in this. To me, it shows they understand the value in how it will enhance DevOps practices and developer productivity in their organizations.
It has staying power. It has to be delivering value, right? Sometimes it comes in as the fad. I used to call it the airline magazine
Yes.
quandary, which is my boss read this on the airline magazine that we need one of those, whatever one of those is.
Right. But I think well done platform engineering in an organization would be hard to undo. And I won't read ahead to some of the reasons why, but they are in some of the other questions that we're going to cover. But well done. I think the return on investment would be so high that an organization would say yes, regardless of where it lives. We need to continue with this practice.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very true of most people's experience. Well, speaking of that, let's and by the way, I mentioned this in the chat. If you have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A tab. Also, just your thoughts, reactions, comments. Hey, my experience is different than that, or what about this? Please pop that into the public chat. We'll try to weave those things into our conversation here today. We've got a great representation from folks across the globe. So I think all those continents that I mentioned and more. So another interesting question is, where does it sit? It's kind of like, where is security? Does it fit under this organization, or is that part of the CIO, or whatever? Same thing kind of for platform engineering. Where does it tend to live in an organization? Obviously, from this chart, the largest percentage is it's its own function. Or it might even be a center of excellence. So it's not an adjunct piece of another part of the organization, at least in close to 30% of the time. Now, second runner-up is in the infrastructure group. And that's not too surprising, because a lot of platform engineering seems to evolve to incorporate what we might have called cloud engineering, or other kinds of infrastructure engineering roles. Does that make sense to you as well?
It does. It definitely does. And one point that is really interesting to me here is a lot of conversations I've had. The thought was, platform engineering, automatic fit with shared services. But we see here the shared services is a lot smaller. Having more conversations about why this might be, and this could be controversial. Would love to know your thoughts, audience members. Shared services and platform engineering actually would be sometimes at cross purposes, because in a lot of organizations, shared services, because they have such a large remit, they are looking at how can they do so much more with so much less. It is sometimes more of a ticket-based organization. They are doing a lot of order fulfillment, where with platform engineering, we are trying to treat, again, the developers as customers. We are trying to figure out what their needs are and deliver value, versus how can we deliver the most with the least amount of output. So platform engineering being away from services and more toward a center of excellence or on an infrastructure team, to me, makes perfect sense.
Well, I think it also helps to your point you're making is it helps you focus on who the customer is for this, right? Nods, I think, is the person's name in the comments. It said essentially that, take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers, right? If they feel like they're fulfilling, helping someone be more productive or deliver for the customer, that gives them a sense of job satisfaction. Also, the receivers of it, knowing that you're doing this work for me, not just because you have this responsibility, right, or this in your title. Jason also commented, he said, I like the thought of viewing devs as a customer for DevOps platform infrastructure, whereas where areas do focus on and measure for success. So, they each have different needs, right? DevOps people have charged for, if that's a title or a function, a little bit different than what platform and infrastructure folks and dev folks need to accomplish, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, good. Let's and thank you for commenting, and also thank you for your questions. Please join in right along with us. We want to hear what you're thinking about.
Yeah,
And
and if you have platform engineering in your organization and your experience is different, or even if it's the same, I always love to hear about those stories.
well, and I didn't say this in the beginning. One of my thoughts about why it's gotten the adoption that it has so fast is that in a way it's kind of like DevOps. It's fungible and it can be adapted to what your needs are at that time. So if developer productivity is the thing, then do an internal developer portal. If it's we have chaos in our environments and too many of them and we can't, we're having problems with because of that or can't keep track of them, begin to pull that together and make that
Yep,
more efficient.
standardization.
Exactly.
Right.
Or if you need to work with SREs on performance and things like that, there's so many areas that if that's your need, then
Hmm.
platform engineering can focus in that area versus this is a methodology, you have to do it this way, and that's sort of the rigid limitations. It's not that at
Right.
all.
Right. And I think I don't think it's one of the data points um, in the survey, but when we talk about the size of organizations, it can be really impactful. If you think about a very large organization with thousands of developers, um, and you are trying to put your arms around how to manage all of that at scale, be consistent, be efficient, have quality. Platform engineering is a great solution. But even if you're a smaller organization and you have a more agile environment and you want to move faster, platform engineering is still a great solution.
Hmm. Very good point. Totally agree. Alrighty, let's take a look at another data point. See what this might tell us. Rod, thank you for your +1. We appreciate even that kind of feedback. Let us know what you're thinking. So you always have to ask why. Okay, if it's being adopted, why? Is it more than a fad? Is it delivering value? What were some of the challenges that you initially said, let's formalize this and make it a discipline? And the top response was developer productivity. Come on down, the price is right. That's been a big focus for folks. Interesting, implementing CI/CD pipelines was right there along with standardizing tools and process, enhancing security, and really effectively, they're all within 3 points of each other.
Yes.
Also managing infrastructure as code. So there isn't one dominant reason why people are implementing it, though maybe developer productivity is a very common focus across organizations. But
But so many of
several,
these can be connected, right?
yeah. Okay, say
These
some
are,
more.
these are connected reasons. So if you think about implementing CI/CD pipelines, and if you have multiple tools, multiple pipelines, developers can't work together, right? You use platform engineering to streamline and standardize. Now productivity is up, right? You standardized on your tools and your processes. Through that, maybe your security is now heightened, right? So you have used maybe one of those reasons, but the fallout is you've impacted more than one of those reasons. I think these are so intertwined, is one of the reasons why they are within a few points of one another.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mention CI/CD. Obviously, something that CloudBees knows a lot about, given history with Jenkins and your product lines and things, is what's underlying that. It's the platforms that are doing that, whether it's the platform for CI/CD itself or dev platforms, test platforms, production, etc. So that's the kind of foundation that those things are built on. That CI/CD is built upon. I also noticed, developers aren't always the most favorable of here, come over and tell me what tool I have to use. They're a pretty independent group, and like to work with new things, and they have preferences, maybe really strong feelings and preferences about it. But standardizing tools and process, I think one of the things that helps focus that is if your customer are developers, then guess what? You're going to need to do things that they're going to use if you're going to be successful.
Right.
So keeps that.
And one of the things with standardization doesn't necessarily mean lack of choice. It may mean you go from a catalog of 15 potential tools down to a catalog of 5, but those 5 are tested. You know that those 5 can be integrated, those 5 are secure, and those 5 are approved. And to Jason's point, that he made in the chat, the guardrails and process improvements that you have for settling down the chaos, as he's saying, happens in his organization, just taking some of that mental load off so folks can can focus on the important work that they need to get done.
I think another dimension of productivity is reducing friction. If you can just, people will use what you're producing if it just makes their job easier, right? Okay, good. I'm happy to not have to do that. Or
Exactly.
I have so many issues trying to make that work in our system or processes or tech stack that I'm happy if it'll do what I need it to do or close enough. I'll trade off that for me having to do all that work. So, all right, let's take a look at our next data point. What are the main uses of platform engineering in your organization? Here's where we're getting into kind of what are they doing? Like what are they providing to the company? So managing dev test prod environments seems like that's the bread and butter, right? Of where so much is happening and producing results out of the software process. CI/CD pipeline management, cloud environment management, especially if you're multi-cloud or on-prem and in a cloud hybrid. Infrastructure provisioning, developer platform as a service, kind of things consistent with what we've said. Again, a fairly even distribution across those, and there's no one spike and everything's smaller. So there's a lot of areas that we're contributing beneficially to the organization through platform engineering.
Yeah, what I was surprised when I saw the answers to this question. One of the things I honestly thought IDPs were going to place higher, and maybe because in conversations I've had, IDP for so many organizations is the starting point for the developers. You have the IDP, that's where they go, and the benefits follow from the other points out of the IDP. But based on who was answering the survey, right? If I am not a person who is building and maintaining the IDP, maybe then yes, pipeline engagement, managing the environments, those are the things that I see and seem to be the main uses in my organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, sort of the IDP or environments kind of be the new term that's come along with platform engineering. I also, if I think back to what are one of our biggest complaints in a development environment, it's getting access to resources, it's getting infrastructure, getting environments set up, especially if you had to open the good old ticket, right, with operations or whoever was managing those things. So by kind of taking that on and making sure, again, kind of the frictionless or reducing friction, I could see that why that would be high in the list too.
Very
I
good.
don't know if you saw Detlef's comment in chat. He says sometimes DevOps adopt platform engineering to make their life a little bit easier for themselves. Defining processes to deploy an environment gives you more time for the real hard processes. So ship the easy things in an automated environment, make life much easier. I agree with that.
Agreed. Get rid of that 20% that's slowing you down, maybe, right? And let the platform engineering team lift that piece for you.
Well, and I think that one of the most important words that Detlef used in his comment was automated environments. now you're getting consistent results. And it's not Mitch does this way and Hope does that way, and that team over there does it differently.
And Hope's on PTO, so who knows what's going to happen yet.
Yeah. She's working on some special project there and can't have time to come do what she's doing, right? She's got other jobs.
Right.
So it makes a big difference when you can create things consistently and manage them over time. It's a big improvement. So Detlef's getting some good props here.
Yeah, but I think also all of these things are, again, tying into, managing that complexity and improving the developer experience. That is, to me, one of the biggest benefits. Companies will say, there are other benefits, but in the end, if the development team is not happier with the way they are able to get their work done, I personally feel, in my biased opinion, that platform engineering is probably not working as well as it should.
Say some more.
There is, if you are not making it so that developers want to go to the IDP, they want to use the tools that have been curated for them, they understand and find it easy to use the golden paths that have been set out, right? Developers are creative enough to try to find a way around it. And then your platform engineering endeavor is not working, or they will vote with their feet and move to a different department that maybe is outside the scope of platform engineering at the time, or maybe move to another organization altogether where they feel they can work the way that they want. So if developer experience and developer happiness is not something that is somehow being measured or checked on, and it's just some of the other factors, it's a big opportunity that is missed there, because developers are creative people, right? Make it so that they're happy at work.
Joanna asked a question here in chat. How do platform engineers choose their tools that help address their developer needs and challenges? You want to take a shot at that first? You'd like me to?
I think, well, I can speak from my experience. Okay. I can't say how it happens everywhere, but in the organizations I've been with where we had platform engineering teams, of course, there are tools that already exist when you arrive, right? And some of those are so embedded, extricating them is hard. Those are grandfathered in. You make sure they're secure, you figure out how they work, you absorb the cost and you move on. But then other times it is the platform engineering team sees something, hears something, and says, wow, this looks neat. The development team says, hey, here's this really cool tool I want to use. And the way we managed it was we tried to work 3 to 6 months ahead of the development teams. So if we knew there was something coming up, maybe the way they were building was changing and it required a different tool, we know the roadmap far enough out, and we interview and we have those conversations. We figure out, here are 5 tools that could fit the bill. Let's narrow it down. Let's test it and try it first. Now let's show it to the development team, see what they like. And based on that, we qualify a few tools and bring those tools in. It was a great way for us to do it. And for platform engineering team members, it's a lot of fun because they are the first ones to try really everything that comes in-house. And yes, requirements were a part of that. I didn't mention requirements, but requirements was a given for us. But yes, that was the way we managed it. Working 3 to 6 months out, making sure they had what they needed at the time that it came in.
I think that's a great perspective. Don't solve today's problems only. It's where you're going and make sure that's the problems that you're either solving or heading to solve.
Absolutely.
To that point, mentioning requirements gathering, the best way to make a customer happy is ask the customer what they need, right?
Yes.
So do some kind of an assessment. The methodology, quasi methodology I've seen used is first you need to know what you're using, the inventory, and get feedback from the people utilizing those tools. And to your point, some things may not be worth the effort or the brain damage, frankly, to yank something off out of your environment and replace it. It's just not worth it. So keep that running and kind of treat it as much as you can as part of the platform to keep things consistent where that's possible. But look for the things that are working. More importantly, understand why they're working and what needs to be done to each of those environments. And then in assessing that, I think a good approach is to form a collaborative team with your customers. So let's sit down and look at the data. Not everybody's here to advocate for their favorite tool. We're here to figure out what environments we really want to support and going to help us achieve our goals. And then also think about the environments that those tools have to support delivering configurations, platforms, etc. So you might have a Java environment here and a Node.js here and whatever it might be, maybe a mainframe, application that you're trying to figure out how you're going to have to support. So you know what the end destination is, in addition to putting tools in developers and others' hands. But what do those environments look like?
Yeah, and to your point, the collaboration is really important because sometimes a tool will be identified that no one asked for, and you need to sell it. Somehow you need to sell it, and maybe you can't sell it, but it's the tool, right? So you need to make sure that everyone understands the reasons behind that and implement it well, so it doesn't feel forced on people if you can avoid it.
You don't want to be received, the adage, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. I'm from platform engineering. I'm here to help. Well, thank you.
Right.
Very much. I didn't know I needed that.
Right.
One thing I think also to consider is how do you introduce change? People are going to find good tools, new tools, enhancements to what you're doing or extensions to it. And how can they experiment? How can they contribute that back to the center of excellence of people that are supporting the platform engineering? So having that, otherwise, if you're cutting it out and saying, okay, walls are built, this is all we're going to use, thou shalt not use any other tool. Well, thou shalt go away because I'm going to do it anyway, right?
Right. It's going to be the model for developer unhappiness. That case study would be written from that one.
Detlef made a comment, and Jason always talking about the dynamic tension here. Sometimes customer doesn't know what they need, right? Well, they may not know also because they don't know what's possible. And that can come from what other teams are doing as well, or also looking for outside experiences.
Because the platform engineering team's view is so much broader than those of the development team. They are looking across the entire enterprise, and especially if it's a large implementation, and you have anywhere from 1,000 to maybe 5,000 developers, and each team has a different need, but they all need to work together. That platform engineering team is going to come with a lot of tools that maybe have not been tried or requested. So yes.
Good points. All righty. Let's go back and take a look at our next piece of data we gathered. What platform engineering objectives are most important to your organization? It's kind of why are we doing this, right? What is it we're trying to help, fix, contribute to in the organization? We haven't talked about self-service. We did talk about internal developer portals. So it's kind of implied in that. That doesn't necessarily have to be self-service. My experience is rather than waiting on someone else, doing it myself, if I can, and it's not an obstacle to get it done, is usually in most cases received as a positive, as long as it's not taking me away from what my core work is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think also these priorities here show, again, I know we keep saying developer experience, but improving the developer experience, make sure operations are streamlined, reducing the complexity. All of these things are going to accelerate the development cycles and enhance productivity. So there are a lot of wins here for an organization that can get these right.
Yeah, it's interesting. On the list too, a little bit far. This one's a little bit spread out in terms of the responses, a little more than the others. Remove delays and bottlenecks. Well, that's a very DevOps-y Phoenix project kind of thing to do, right? Is look where the problems are and go solve the biggest bottleneck. One of the things I learned about bottlenecks is, don't work on the things that are before the bottleneck, because all you do is make more work arrive faster. And don't work on the things after the bottleneck, because they sit there starved for work because the bottleneck's holding it all up.
True.
And work on that thing that's disrupting flow in the organization. And once you get that working, guess what? There'll be another bottleneck somewhere else.
Yeah.
That will be the important one to focus on.
I'm going to ask you to speculate.
Okay. I'm not good at that. No, actually, an analyst, I have to do that. Okay. All right.
Why do you think cognitive load is so much lower than everything else? That was interesting when I saw this the first time.
It's a very good question. And I kind of think of developing software like writing a book or writing a white paper. You don't just pick back up where you left off. And if you haven't written something like that, or you haven't written software, I mean, other jobs take a lot and have their own cognitive requirements, right? But it takes quite a bit, at least for me, to get back in the headspace of what I was doing and how I was thinking about solving the problem, or where I was at, or what I was trying to see what might work. All of those kind of things. I think if you've been a developer, you really appreciate how hard that is.
Yes.
And it's kind of as hard as other people's job. It may be just kind of another step up. That's my guess. I don't know if that's true. I don't have data to back that up.
Yeah. And the brief stint of my life where I was coding, I think if I could stay in the flow, I wasn't necessarily concerned about anyone relieving, the load on my mind. I was enjoying solving the problems that needed to be solved. But if there is a great amount of task switching there, now that load, I want someone to alleviate and find a way out for me. Yeah. But I was surprised though to see that cognitive load was only at 10%.
Well, one of my measures is who's wearing the noise canceling headphones in your organization. It's almost always the developers, right? The folks that are doing it. And somebody told me once, well, I don't really need the noise canceling. I just do it so people don't come up and interrupt me. Okay.
Create a little bubble, a little private room.
Right. Hey, by the way, Toyo asked if we're make the recording available. Yes, everybody will get an email with a link to the recording, so you can rewatch, share with your friends, all that good kind of thing. So all good stuff. And you'll get the data, get the slides, as well as the pulse meter report that we're talking about today. It's also available in the handout section. See, I also want to take a moment to talk about culture. There's a rolling conversation with Jason and Rod and Nods and some other folks talking about the culture of the organization. I think Jason kind of summed it up well. Hopefully the culture is pushing for a more included and communicative environment for the team. Sometimes we as the solution producers can help in that vein. It is if you're in the land of stovepipes or land of silos, it's tough to get collaborative things working. But hopefully if you're doing Agile, you're doing DevOps, doing some of those and some of those practices, that kind of frees, at least to a degree, the organization to kind of thinking about working together to solve problems.
Yeah, I hate silos too, Jason.
We should have that a black T-shirt.
I know that's a great T-shirt. Yeah, go ahead and put that T-shirt somewhere, Jason, and send me it. But culture though, and Mitch, you and I have had this conversation very recently.
I know.
Culture can work against the organization because, again, you have a platform engineering team. Let's say that they are a very high performing team and they are in the midst of an organization that does not have the same ethos, right? Now they are odd man out. It may seem they're working against the organization, but they're not, right? They probably are setting a great pattern that the rest of the organization can follow. But how do they make that happen, right? Culture clashes can be very powerful. And one of the other things that I want to mention quickly, culture can also impact just even things like implementation, how quickly a team adopts a tool, how quickly the team is implemented, how long it takes to roll it out and be productive. Culture is impactful for all of those things.
Mm-hmm. You know, I used to do talks about culture and how to make cultural change. And one of the things I realized was culture happens. Whether you intentionally do anything about it or not, it is there. And it will evolve itself to be what it needs to be successful in the organization.
Yes.
And, if you're intentional about it, then you can see what things you might want to adjust or change in the culture. But those are even that is very difficult to do. It's hard to shift. So I usually recommend to folks understand what's important in your culture and what do people get rewarded for, and try to orient your objective that you're trying to achieve around those things so that you're going in the flow of what works in the culture as opposed to be kind of the antibody to the
Right.
culture, because that's not a fun role or a successful one.
Yeah. And sometimes organizations get lucky, but some accidental cultures can just be absolutely counter to what is needed for teams to work well and be happy.
I like Lucian's thinking. I think culture can help enhance the synergy of teams. Then you're in a good place in many ways.
Yes.
All righty, let's take a look. How do you measure success? We're talking about, keeping our customers happy, developers and others that are part of the platform engineering ecosystem. So what are ways you think about how you're going to say, are we doing the right things and are we being successful at them? Measuring developer productivity, that again, being one of the top points, consistent with the previous data and the things we've talked about. Internal DevOps KPIs. Now, this could also be, DORA metrics kind of things too. I'd love to hear your experiences with setting up goals and measurements and KPIs and any lessons learned you might have that would be helpful for implementing platform engineering.
Two different organizations, two different platform engineering teams, two very different, very, very different cultures, which was borne out by what the KPIs were. In one organization, everything was velocity and cost control, right? The developers were generally okay, but I won't say that they were necessarily happy, right? Because the culture of that organization was more of a little more command and control, right? So those are the things that came out there. So productivity, absolutely. Cost control, absolutely. Tool sprawl, if it falls into those two things. But in another organization where there was a lot more freedom, a lot more latitude, of the points here, I would say simplification of the environments so the teams could move faster. And a lot of it so that the individual developers could have more visibility and control over what they were doing and make sure things are stable. Everything is stable, stable, stable. There was a lot of chaos monkey at the time to reinforce that. But in that organization, it was more about empowerment, right? And it was productivity fell out of making sure developers had the right tools to do the right work at the right time, and everything was up and running when it needed to be. So it was very different based on the culture of each of those organizations.
Fantastic. Speaking of culture, Nance asked you a question in chat. Can you explain a little bit more about accidental culture?
Yes. Accidental culture is, it's challenging because you usually will have someone higher up in leadership who will say culture is this squishy thing that you can't really control, right? That you don't really take time to influence. It just sort of happens. But one of the things I have seen happen with an accidental culture is you get pockets of different types of cultures across the organization. So by functional group, it's almost like you're in a completely different company, a completely different organization. And there's not unifying themes across everyone that everyone knows they can move toward. What this can sometimes do, if you've never read the book, Speed of Trust, that's a great book.
A great book. I love that book.
Yeah. The more people trust each other, the faster things move, the less it costs to get work done. Accidental cultures often are low trust. So having some intentional work behind the culture and making sure that you can, have transparency, trust, accountability without blame, all of those things help things move faster, and ensures that you're not working as if you have 10 different companies when you should just be one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I popped in the link to Stephen Covey Jr., the senior son, the guy who wrote the Effective Habits of Successful People, whatever that title was. But a really good book, and he's got a great website about building trust in the organization, importance of that. One of the other questions we have is around KPIs. What are the DevOps KPIs? That's always a challenge, is helping people set goals and set the right goals or the right measures. I think it was Jason said, yeah, there's some of them are on this slide, right? Internal measures, or measures like cost, sprawl, security, things like that. My suggestion whenever we're setting goals is, you may have some goals or KPIs measures that are about some things that are fairly local to your team or the function that you perform. But I stress to always think about, how do you think about a measure of how you contribute to the outcome of what you're doing, what your organization or what the company is doing. So if the company is working in a, competition has increased drastically, and to stay competitive, we have to improve our customer experience, or we have to get out product faster or more frequently, or can be a lot of different things. And you can go sit down with the chief strategy officer or anybody in the organization and say, I need to know what's important, so I'm setting our goals properly. They're not going to turn you away. They'll be glad to be spending time with, like, thank you to the first person that asked me that.
Yeah.
Think about your measures, not just within the sort of wall of the people and the function that you do, but think about what you're trying to produce, why you're doing the cloud, why you're doing software development and delivery. What's the things that you can contribute? And guess what? You'll get more funding if you do that. By the way, a little secret.
Yeah. And one of my favorite measures for a good KPI, can I make a decision? Does it change anything? Right? Sometimes there are numbers reported in. People just look at the numbers. They're vanity metrics. It doesn't really do or change anything. And those should drop off the board. But for an internal DevOps team, if the KPIs are reported quarter over quarter, month over month, but at no time are those KPIs used to make a decision or change anything, you can probably throw it away and look for something better.
Excellent point. I also want, I'm going to put a link, I put a link into the Speed of Trust site. I also want to put a link in here for the, if you're interested in the DORA metrics, it's not the end all and be all, but it is a great set of metrics to do baseline. Oftentimes, how are we going to prove if we don't know where we are? So there's some good measures in that, but it's not all encompassing and exactly the right fit for
Yeah.
every organization.
I like the question asked about that Siva asked, how platform engineering teams can help with sustainability. The first thing that comes to my mind is if you're on a platform engineering team and you are working with a company right now that is doing anything with AI, the field is wide and green and ready because the energy consumption there is high, focusing on how can you optimize software and hardware infrastructure, right, for better energy efficiency, carbon footprints, cloud optimization, sustainable development practices. Some companies go so far as having green computing initiatives. These are all things that platform engineering teams can be part of.
Absolutely. And there may be choice in technologies or services that you use. Like, for example, I'm happen to be doing some work in the serverless aspect of cloud computing, the cloud native. And, that's a great example of if you have, variations in load and traffic and you need more dynamic scalability and rapidly, that's much better than, like we did in the old data center, or you may even do in the cloud, which is pre-provisioning for your maximum situation when you don't know that that's happening. So there are things like that that you can consider as you work with software and cloud architects and developers that maybe do some experimenting with
For
ideas.
sure.
So
Great question.
good stuff. Yeah, and I want to touch on the AI subject. So I'm going to do that now. You can download this report in the handout section. One of the things in the report that we talked about in the analyst views is I think it's important for functions, teams like platform engineering is to not just engineer for what we need to do today or tomorrow, but be resilient to change, right? How often have we said, here's our plan, and as soon as we hit the save button, the plan's not valid anymore because someone came down and said, well, we need to do this now, right? And so instead of, that sort of tearing up our worlds and bursting our bubble, it's like, we're really good. We know things are going to change. Matter of fact, they always change and they never stay the same, right? Someone's going to be introducing, whether it's us or someone else. So how do we incorporate that in AI, ML, particularly generative AI, bursting onto the scene for most of us? That's a great example. There will be something else like that. Maybe not quite as, all encompassing and impactful as AI, maybe bigger, who knows? But you need to have a process. You need to have also just a mentality of we're really good at adapting to change. And what are the things that are inhibiting us from doing that?
Yes.
Thoughts?
I think it's true. And one of the concerns I'll say is there are some organizations who are so all in, so absolutely all in on AI that it is a fire going across the organization. And I think a thoughtful approach is worthwhile. It feels like everything is moving so quickly, and it is, but some organizations probably could afford to pump the brakes a little bit more and plan where is it that they actually really want to go versus just jumping on the train, and ending up somewhere that says AI, right? It is a journey. It is a journey. Even though it feels like a short trip, it definitely is a journey.
What's the saying? If you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there.
Exactly. Omoteo has a good question. How can environments be simplified? Right? For me, high level, understanding across your organization what needs to get done and making sure you are filling, those needs that are repeating needs across the organization. You're going to get some standardization there if you do that, at minimum. And it sounds simple. There's a lot of work, but understanding truly what you need to get done and what those environments need to do, and optimizing for that.
Great. I didn't spell applies right, but I popped in. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. There are times when that's a great idea, but we're not going to do it.
Right.
So before we wrap things up here, we're coming up on our time. I want to be sure and share some of the kind of follow-on information. Here are some places where you can get a hold of the research report. If you want to hold your phone up to the screen, take either a photo or click on the links to. There's also a place to get set up a free account. Tell folks what they'll be able to do with the CloudBeast free account.
Yes, so we have a CloudBeast SaaS platform, so you can go in, you can connect your repo, you can run workloads, and get some advanced analytics for your pipelines. It's free up to a certain number of users, very quick to get started. And if you do sign up, we also have a community Slack channel where we would love to get your feedback. And on the next slide is another fun thing. Talking about t-shirts earlier.
Okay.
Submit a workflow, do a screenshot, send it to us, post it. Information on the next slide on how to post that, and get a t-shirt. Get happens from, it's not there.
Yep,
well, you can also contact me and I can tell you more of how to do it. But the information is also posted on our website. But yeah, we're doing a great t-shirt giveaway. This is the only way to get the t-shirt. I don't even have one yet. I need to get one. So yeah, limited edition run. If you want to get one, submit a workflow, get a t-shirt.
Absolutely. I bet you can find out in that Slack channel how to get a hold of that. Right?
I think you can. If you go to that Slack channel, we will tell you how to do it.
Our friend Heidi put the link in there.
Thank you, Heidi.
About workflows. So find out a little bit more with that. And if Cody, if we could, we'll include some of the links that we talked about today during our conversation. So in the follow-up email to everyone. Well, at the risk of getting kicked off the stage, I want to thank you. First, it's always a pleasure working with you and
with you as well.
With you and the CloudBeast team.
Yes.
And thank our audience and all the folks that helped put this together. The running dialogue in chat is fantastic.
Yes.
You really did shape our conversation. As you could tell, we navigated to where a lot of the discussion was happening and vice versa. So yeah, it made our very engaging conversation. So any parting words before we turn it back to Cody?
Just, keep at it and find more opportunities to shape, the conversations around culture, platform engineering. It feels like a short road, but it's a lot longer. And each one of us is contributing to how this turns out.
You bet. One little tip, managers love data, so use those charts to your advantage. Okay, back to you, Cody.
Awesome. Well, Mitch and Hope, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure hearing from the both of you over the past hour. I'd like to just a couple of reminders for our audience before we close things out today. Our session today was recorded, so you will be receiving in an email a link to access our recording on demand, but you'll also find it living on the DevOps website. Just visit devops.com/webinars. I'll also remind you to jump over to those handouts before we close out, just to get those while you can. I'll be sure to include them in the email afterwards, but grab them now. It'll be a little bit easier for you. I will be contacting two of our most engaged attendees today to give you a $50 Amazon gift card. So thank you so much for your chats and questions today. And if you maybe weren't so involved today, that's okay. We do have a webinar survey. It is in the handout section. Filling that out will make you eligible for this giveaway as well. So I'd like to thank CloudBeast for sponsoring our webinar today. I'd like to thank Techstrong Research for conducting the research for our pulse meter. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you spending your time with us, and we hope to see you at a future learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and you may now disconnect.